because as we collect together, we really, in a way, believe that the sort of the universal forces of our being together have brought us together, and that each of us then represents a star in our constellation. And you'll hear this metaphor coming around more and more frequently, but especially as we look toward our trajectory in isoma. That is, we look at these elements of our experience, image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect, as basically that's memory. That these are the stars, or of a constellation that forms states. And we'll again, I'll explicate this much more later, but just to say that this notion is that all of those elements are basically what in memory would be called retrieval cues. And what we hope to gain, part of what we hope to gain here in the End of Trauma course, is a more up-to-date version of understanding what memory really is. That is, memory is seems like, as we as we think about something, and I remember part of my day yesterday, I get a little image in the mind, right? There's like a little movie that comes up of say watching a movie, and so that feels like, seems like, that's what memory is. Like it's like a movie in the mind, but it's really not. We have to look back to the projector and to see, like in the digital format, that there are all these pixels. There are all these dots. So you're looking at a computer screen right now, and it looks like I'm sitting here talking to you, which I am. But in reality, what we are seeing is a bunch of little dots of color that are then assembled in a certain pattern, and that certain pattern is what you see on your screen there. So in organic intelligence, that isoma are those pixels, and it looks like it presents like a memory. But really what we're going to do is get behind that assembly and understand each of the component parts, and we'll become more developed. I evoke in organic intelligence this theme really from Plato and the Allegory of the Cave, and Plato says that life, and we are like people who have been chained with our backs against a low wall, and in front of us we see the wall of the cave, and we're in this cave. This is the allegory of the cave, and behind us is this wall, and we can't move, we can't see much except what is right in front of us, and that our backs against this low wall. And then behind the wall, though, is a fire, and that people will walk in front of the fire, and as they walk in front of the fire, their shadows are cast upon the wall of the cave, which then we can see. And so he says it's like we have grown up from our origins with only that. And so in that, the shadows are real. That's what we know, is those shadows. And that becomes our world. And he said, if you were to tell somebody in that condition, hey, by the way, those are shadows, and there is this other real situation happening back there. If you were to tell somebody that, they just go, you kind of lost it there, Plato, And this is a reality, and I can tell you what's happening here. I can predict what's going to happen, which proves that it's real, right? And so, and he says then that should someone be, say, freed and turn around, the light from the fire would be so bright it would hurt their eyes, and that further, if they were then brought out of the cave, the light would be blinding and so painful that they would often then really prefer to be back in the cave rather than in the light of day. So we are seeing this this whirring world out here. We are seeing and recalling. We are making mental representations and even image representations of what the world is like, and we somehow forget that these are the pixels. We are seeing the pixels. And so what we're going to do here in our end of trauma course is begin to understand that memory and our current experience as it is related to that pixel process is just that. That is, our states, also the experience of myself in this moment, may have so much more to do with those pixels than with being in reality. That is, I may be looking at the shadows rather than looking at the reality. Right? And so we are going to, in these days together, we're going to work to come up with a relationship to reality, and it begins with orientation. Orientation is connecting to the environment through the senses so that I give my biology a chance to respond to this moment, so that then I can relate to reality rather than relating to states that are evoked by a host of other reasons, right? Which are the shadows on the wall. And those host of other reasons are, and those hosts of other states, sure, includes trauma. It includes states of fight and flight and freeze. It includes these states that are the sort of the traumatically induced and reproduced states, which are fight, flight, and then immobility. IMM stands for immobility and freeze, and that those conditions also are comprised of and made up of, these states are made up of mostly isoma elements in certain configurations. So this element here, say at this, say this element here, let's say this is an A. This is an affect of, say, of anger, and then this element here, this is a sensation of constriction in the throat. And then this one, this is the image of like stabbing someone, right? And so this is a constellation. This is a state, and I believe that is real. And so in believing, oh, I have one's mind accommodates to our state. It creates ways in which that scenario, that constellation of anger and tension and image, the state of A, of affect, and then the let's see, the anger, and then the sensation channel, and then the image channel. So it's ASI, the ASI constellation that just happens repeatedly. The mind makes up ways to make that make sense. That is, the mind brings us a rationale for why that's true, why that shadow on the wall is reality, right? And it's called in psychology, it's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance says when you're presented with conflicting ideas, the mind works to diminish that conflict. So if there is this sensation, this image, sensation, and then the affect, sensation, and image constellation, and I'm just making a little graph of that here, right? If there is that constellation, that is then it forms a kind of memory, or so the mind puts those together and said, this is why it makes sense. because that person did me wrong, or that's this aggression that I have, or it makes up a story basically that makes that constellation make sense. But the thing that we understand now from science is that the mind doesn't care about the reality. The reality is those are pixels. Those are self-reinforcing pixels that are just happening over and over again. And in this end of trauma course, we're going to begin to become familiar enough with all of these isoma elements, so that then we can begin to recognize them when they come through, and recognize them individually, but also recognize their repeated constellations. When we get to the latter weeks, like week 8, week 7, and then we will look at specifically the constellations that come up. And we begin to recognize these constellations, and we've become less convinced. It's like, oh yeah, that's that shadow. That's the shadow of, a horse or something, right? A horse walked in front of the fire. That's that constellation. That's Scorpio, right? That constellation, that combination of affect and sensation and image. That's I recognize that, and I stop believing it. I stop taking it so seriously, and I stop taking it so personally, right? By being able to get back into the projector room, and we can begin to zoom in a little bit and see the pixels of our experience, the isoma pixels of our experience, we begin to get distance from it, and we can become what the Buddhists would call less attached. We're non-attached. And ancient traditions have different words for this. We would say we become less identified with that constellation. I become less attached to that. I get relationship or ego strength by developing this self-other relationship to that experience that I normally take so personally, right? So that's part of our trajectory of learning each of these isoma elements individually, delving into each individual isoma channel with significant depth, this week coming up being the image week, and becoming adept at the language of image, and then in the next week, becoming more adept at the language of sensation, and then we'll have 2 weeks here in orientation, and then more adept in the language of meaning, of cognition, of meaning and meaningfulness, and then lastly in emotion, and then adept at seeing the combinations of these. And when we become adept in each of these individually and then in the constellation, I have that distance. I have that observer relationship to it, and not in a way that we are dissociated, but in a way that we are engaged and involved and feeling all of that, but without the sense of saying, that's me. We gain this perspective of being that is liberated from the particularities of our biological conditioning, which are those constellations, which are those states, right? So that's a bit our direction here, and want to begin by today talking a little bit more about the notion of these states. And I'm adjusting my screen ever so slightly. Okay, and so the constellation that I was talking about then was us, the constellation of us. That is, each one of us here is one of the stars that creates the constellation of the end of trauma course. And organic intelligence is uniquely a systems approach in that way. We're understanding complex systems, which means that we see that each of us are these stars, and that each of us belong in this constellation in this moment. And so welcome. stars to the end of trauma course. And so your questions, your chat, your Q&A time is more than individual. That is, you are part of this constellation, and that we each are then somehow, very likely, not disconnected, but then we hold for each other important information. So please be able to get us your questions, your comments, like self-image and so on, these notions, and we will deem that your questions are valuable not only to your question, but that they are in some ways representative of our collective as a whole. Right, so feel free to pitch in with your questions and comments however you like. Thank you, Diane, for that, and Michael also for that. Yeah. So, I am reading, Diane, your question about resources for getting that subject-object, self-other concepts, similar to the self-image question from Michael. So, thank you for participating, because it's really about these notions of self, right? What's me, what's not me, and so on. So, let me begin then with a share here of our basic graphic. And just a reminder too, I'll see if I can pull this up. I'm going to do a screen share for you. Okay, here we go. So today I'm going to be looking into the chat zone. The Q&A is where I'll look for most of the questions. We're recording this, so if you're watching this on the recording, welcome. I hope you'll join us live, because you are a star too, and your questions and engagements really matter. And we're going to be looking at some of the maps today. And some of those maps then are in your welcome section. So here we are in our first welcome video area, or welcome zone. We start at the end of trauma course right here. And then if you look in your menus section, there is this welcome. And then in the welcome, there are this roadmap to healing section. I would print out these graphics. These graphics here, these are key, and they're all in the downloads. The three-phase model, the addiction to intensity, the trauma healing, and then the organic intelligence, the ISOMA channels graphics. So I would download those. And then today, I'd like to begin with one of those in particular, and that's the one we're looking at here, is this three-phase graphic. And the three-phase graphic is really key, because as we're working in image, sensation, and all of the ISOMA channels, we're going to be using the workbook, we're going to be using the SUPs, we're going to be using the info videos, and there's going to be then a question about what I am to do. And I'm going to, in the workbook and all of the SUPs and all of the info videos, really talk about this distinction between what I can do, and doing technically really comes into phase 2. That is what I can be actively doing and executing here. I'm gaining control. And then where letting go of control and moving from the agency of doing into the experience of being. And so that doing, being dialectic, those two is a phase 2, phase 3 process. And so there are times that we are going to be doing, and then times we're going to be letting go of doing. And in part, then, that polarity, that dialectic, is part of our major theme, which is the major theme of these cycles of our nervous system process altogether. Our nervous system process and our biological process is really residing in the notion of biological synchrony, where our cells are oscillating. Uh, our, our nerve cells and our system cells are, from the complexity science world, known as coupled oscillators. That is, they are ticking all at the same time. So in our coaching yesterday, and also in our original webinar, I talked about the heart's pacemaker, which is these 10,000 cells that are doing this ticking, and this ticking is graphed here. So it's on, off, up, down, work, rest. And everything has those two sides. And those two sides then create large and small systems. We are a large system of that, and one of the larger representations of that is breathing in and breathing out. And when I breathe in, heart rate increases. When I breathe out, heart rate decreases. And all of those cycles of ups and downs then are meant to be synced. They're meant to be working in synchrony and in collaboration with each other. And we see then our system is a complex of multiples of these. There are all kinds of these, which of ups and downs and work and rest and organizing and disorganizing, all of these polarities. And a system that is in desync, or the system that is suffering because of the desynchrony of that system, of our system, which is also then the suffering of disharmony and the way that our systems are not moving in a nice, clear, harmonic, oscillating pattern. And we will look at all the ways that these patterns, which I simply call red and blue, are in balance, or it's yin and yang. And our systems are large and small representations of that. So the 10,000 cells of the heart's pacemaker, that's a system that then is being influenced by respiration. So the respiration comes and the vagal brake is on, right? So on the in-breath, and I'll stop the share for this graphic. So there, on the heart rate, there's what's called the vagal brake, and it just keeps the heart moving in this what's called this respiratory sinus arrhythmia, this up and down. And the vagal brake is on, otherwise the heart would be going, those cells are ticking at a native rate of about 100 per minute. And so there's this brake on, so that's nice and smooth, and then I breathe in, heart rate, the brake comes off, heart rate goes up, and I breathe out, heart rate goes down, brake goes back on. And that's how it's supposed to happen. The brake is on, it sort of keeps us, from just going, down the hill super fast. So, so I breathe in, the brake comes off, heart rate goes on, and then I breathe out, brake goes on, heart rate goes back down. That's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it's just simple representation of this graphic of ups and downs. That the heart rate goes up, heart rate goes down. I breathe in and I breathe out. And all of our systems have multiple embedded relationships like that. And the efficiency of our system is related to the efficiency of the synchrony and the harmonic and flexible relationship of these ups and downs. That's biological synchrony. And what we will do over this time is ride these waves of ups and downs better and better, and know that I'm calling them by name, red and blue. And you see, sorry, you see this also in red and blue here. And you'll see it in your morning workbook, that's red. In your evening workbook, that's blue. And there is always this movement of up and down, because that's what our experience is. There is light, and then there is dark. And the sun comes up, and then the sun sets. And at sunset and at sunrise, that is a neurotransmitter party. All right, when the sun is setting and the rays of light reach a certain wavelength, we have a specific neurotransmitter state, right? And our systems are in these like 24-hour cycles, these circadian cycles, ups and downs, and we are embedded within these cycles of ups and downs, and within that cycle of up and down are other cycles of ups and downs. So there is the rising and setting of the sun, and then there are multiple cycles of 90-minute cycles of basic rest and activity cycles that look actually a little bit more like this pattern, which is multiple embedded patterns. There is the big up, the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, and then within that there are multiple cycles of the basic rest and activity cycle, right? And each of those cycles is composed of smaller cycles. Today we went on, I hope, a fractal safari. So we are talking about fractals now exactly because of this. That is, we are fractal beings, and our physiology is doing this fractal work because that's how nature operates. The fractal was coined by Benoit Mandelbrot, the Yale mathematician, back in 1975. When he was saying that if we want to study the nature of nature, then we have to let go of linear thought. We have to let go of linear geometry, Euclidean geometry, and do what he called fractal geometry. And we in organic intelligence now are studying nonlinear functions here. This is not just a primer in non-duality. It's non-duality in part because it's complexity science. So it's pretty cool. We get really basic science, the science of how things really work, the science of nature, and then see all of the various layers of reality that it represents, from the biological level all the way up to the cosmic level, to the cosmological level. We're going to leave no fractal stone unturned in this journey. So, given that basic framework, then understanding this, the nature of nature in its dualistic side, in these two sides, ups and downs, one of the ups and downs is the doing and good doing that we need to do. And then if we are able to reliably get our, what in the complexity science calls initial conditions set up, orientation to pleasure, stabilizing our relationship to positive feedback, then the system begins to move into self-organization. Self-organization is then when the system goes into synchrony, when it is reforming those natural harmonic cycles of relating systems to systems. Because sometimes, we have respiratory sinus arrhythmia. That is, I breathe in, heart rate goes up. I breathe out, heart rate goes down. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people breathe in, heart rate goes down. They breathe out, heart rate goes up. Or they're breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, no change, just no change. That's a lack, what we call lack of vagal tone, respiratory sinus arrhythmia, lack of vagal tone, and that is a system that is desynced, right? When we have that, then we are really looking at systems that are in chaos. That is a system that is desynced, or radically desynced, and dysregulated, which means that it is desynced mostly by its relationship to negative reinforcement, which means that it is more on the instead of having this nice balance between red and blue, or a nice balance between, say, the freeze system and the fight and the flight and the orientation system, instead of having good balance among all of those, then the system instead is much more inclined toward the red side, the what's wrong side, the activation side, the work side, the doing side, the too much side, the intensity side, right? That's why this graphic is called the addiction to an intensity side. It's negative reinforcement. I've spoken of negative reinforcement both in our original webinar and in the coaching yesterday. So if you didn't see the coaching yesterday, be sure to check that out. But the reason that negative reinforcement, the what's wrong attention is so key for us is that it causes desync because it overemphasizes the red and underemphasizes the blue. So all of our work here is going to be looking at the reinforcement of this side of things, not because it's better for itself, but because we need balance. We need the balance between red and blue. We need the balance of up and down. That is the balance of yin and yang. That's the balance of relationship. That's harmonic relationship of work and rest and work and rest. That is circadian rhythm, right? There is the waking and sleeping. There is the basic rest and activity cycle, 60 minutes of relative activity, 20, 30 minutes of rest. Who of us got that education, right? Who of us was told, okay, so you rest for a while when the energy is there and or when the energy is resting energy, and then when the stimulation comes, then you ride that wave of energy, enjoying, and you enjoy the action, and then you enjoy the inaction. No, we were mostly told, go to work, get busy, make it happen, keep your nose to the grindstone and keep doing that. Or we find substances that impose that rest, right? There's the coffee and the double frappuccino in the morning, and then the 2 glasses of wine in the evening, right? There's the artificial sort of imposition of that form, and frankly, it works for some people. You can probably chemically reproduce that cycle and be functional according to the world, functional according to a dysfunctional society. We want to do better. We want to have a system that is working operationally in a really functional way so that all of our channels then can be related. When we get our cycles of ups and downs really coordinated, all of the isoma channels are feeding back into each other. That is, they are informing and mutually informing my image, my sensation, my orientation, my meaning and affect. All are sharing information with each other, and I become a fully informed human being, fully related to the environment, fully related to my internal experience, and wisdom is the result. The wisdom meaning that I can think independently about how I want to be in the world, and be able to then examine the world as it is and respond from our human nature, which as a social species is compassion. That is, I respond from my nature, not from fight and flight and freeze. I respond from the informed experience of all of this, all of these states, of the sympathetic system of energy, of the dorsal system of inhibition, of the orienting system, the orienting architecture, what Porges calls the ventral vagal system. I get all of those informations that then create more connection between image and sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect, and all of these then are pulsing in information and informative reciprocal relationships. And then I have wisdom, and then I have compassion, and then I have caring for myself and others. And then there is transmission of that caring into society, and that's why we're doing what we do here at Organic Intelligence. So that's our gig. Just to say as well that as we work here, we are often saying to ourselves, "Oh, which phase am I in? Am I in phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3?" Well, remember what our goal is. What phase do we want to be in? We want to be in orientation. So if instead I am saying, "Ooh, what phase am I in?" Mostly then I'm saying, "Ooh, what thoughts can I have right now? How can I identify myself cognitively in order to place myself?" Placing, being placed, that's an important question. We are going to place ourselves in the experience of isoma, in the experience of well-being, by allowing my isoma experience to be related to, first and foremost, the here and now, connected to this environment through the senses, so that my images are somehow informed by the network of the constellation of orientation in the here and now. And so as we look at the image week is going to look at ways of compensating for the what's wrong attention, compensating for the addiction to red and doing too much. And we're going to use image also to facilitate and bring extra support to our work of orientation. And that work of orientation and the use of imagery in that is so important because our systems are disorganized mostly by these fight or flight systems, fight, flight, freeze, these emergency survival systems that just send too much intensity that disorganizes a system. And if my system is really disorganized by that, it means it has a hearty dose of dorsal or freezy business. Freezy business and this dorsal vagal state is the physiological root of dissociation. Meaning might have trouble getting things done. I might have trouble getting agency and doing. I might have more issues with, say, depression. In the dorsal vagal system or the freezy system is what the North American marsupial, the possum, made famous, and it is an inhibition system. It inhibits movement. So I have less motility, less mobility, including especially of the face and emotion. So there is the inhibition on emotion. There is also the inhibition on motion. So so my face may be less. I'll give you an example of this, and it's so key for us. And looking at the uh, at the um, channel of the image channel. Because the image channel is one of the keys for relationship, and especially in relationship, these early relationships where what now is understood as attachment process happens. That is, excuse me. That is, as we relate to one another, we are relating in this very sophisticated way. That is the way that babies' brains are growing. So mom is looking at baby and gazing, and there's this beautiful sort of loving look, and then the baby is there, and the baby's eyes open a little wider, and mom's eyes open a little wider, and then mom gives a little rub on the belly, and the baby wiggles a little bit, and then there's this little smile, and mom says, "Oh, look, the baby's smiling." And all of that is dialogue. That is neurobiological dialogue, where baby gets into what we call a contingent relationship Diane, and this gets a little bit to your question. This other subject-object relationship. I recognize that I am in a subject-object relationship. I recognize that I am in relationship because when I do something, there is call and response. So when my eyes open, I see mom go, "Oh," and when I smile, I see mom go, "Oh, look at baby smile." There is feedback. So our network feedback is really key, and that is the way that baby's dendritic associational network is grown. And we probably, all of us, have too little of it and are seeking out that kind of feedback. And in seeking out that kind of feedback, that kind of attachment scenario, that cure, that cure for the lack of that early feedback, we try to self-feedback. That is, I try to watch myself, and that's the looking at the shadows on the wall, because we are trying to mirror ourselves back into selfhood, but it doesn't work because our system becomes desynced, dysregulated, because I'm not getting that call and response. And that's mediated through the visual channel very much. So the eyes and the image channel is so important, because in part for our species as a social network species, because that call and response, that contingency relationship, that subject-object relationship, that feeling of like I can because you show me that I exist, all of that then so much of that is mediated through the visual channel. So the visual channel is really key. And just a word to the wise, our internal focus and the draw of the focus internally is like the baby who's gone, okay, so outside world is not getting it for me. You know, mom's face, say, has been having so much dorsal vagal influence, the flattening of the affect that I actually need for my reflection. The call and response is this is all of this. And so the freeze system inhibits all of that. So if one has, say, depression or chronic fatigue or other inhibition systems, that's a sign of a system being really in a little bit more in the phase 1 process, which means that my system is dysregulated, and it shows up with considerable load on the freezy business. But the freezy business is only one. The free side is only one side of it. There are other sides as well, and those other sides include the sympathetic side, the fight and the flight, and the energy side, as well as the orientation side. So, excuse me. We are going to work. We're going to work here not only in the freezy business side or for the freezy business side. We're going to trend ourselves toward the orienting architecture and use the visual system and the other senses to engage in orientation, because that's a counterpoint to the freezy business. The inhibition of immobility. And part of the reason for that is that for the freeze system to really set on, it hijacks fibers from the orientation system. So the freeze system is the disorientation, dissociation system, which means that there's not so much availability of movement, there's not so much availability of motion. So there is this flatness, the flatness also of the voice, that is the loss of prosody, right? All of this that says inhibition. And when then I can engage instead the orienting architecture by allowing my eyes to go where they go, to allow the attention to go into the external environment, the orientation system, the vagal system, the ventral vagal system, Michael, the ventral vagal system then engages and takes back the fibers from the free system. So it's literally true then that the orienting system then decreases disorientation. It is physiologically true. That is, the orientation system deprives the disorientation system of its pathways, of its mojo, basically. So the more that we can get that orientation online, the less influence Freezy business has. And when I have less influence on the Freezy business, then I can begin to do more. I can begin to do more. And what we're going to do here is use the image channel to support our system to get orientation and to get positive feedback so that we have less of the red experience, right? Less of this side, more of this side, more balance, and more orientation. And when we're able to get more orientation and less disorientation, then we are able to get more of these processes online: orientation, orientation to pleasure, stabilizing the blue side of things. And then we are setting the conditions in which our system then will become naturally self-organizing. By gaining control and by gaining and plugging the leaks, like self-regulation here in this phase 2 motif means getting control over my states, the states that are the habit constellations. And they are habit constellations because the biology wants to stay safe, stay stable, but that's staying stuck. So we in Organic Intelligence, in this Trauma course, have a very particular incremental protocol for developing these skills so that we can give the system, the biological system, stability, and at the same time gradually working its way from phase 1 to phase 2 and then into phase 3. The image channel is so important here because for systems that have significant dissociation, we don't have as much access to emotion, not so much access to action. Like I can do action in phase 2, but what I do have access to in terms of of our isoma channels, there's not so much affect, there's not so much sensation, even not so much orientation at first because it's the disorientation system. What I have often is meaning and I have image. Meaning is a bucking bronco of experience. Meaning can be anything because the mind is busy trying to make sense of all the things that you're experiencing, all these, the affects and images and sensations and all of these constellations. The mind is busy with cognitive dissonance trying to make sense of it all. One of our hallmark studies, of course, is the Gazzaniga study, in which people had the corpus callosum of their brain cut, and it's the left and right hemisphere that is then doing this interconnected networking, and that corpus callosum is what does that interconnection. But for people that then had grand mal seizures, they cut that corpus callosum so there wouldn't be that interfeedback of intensity. And so, so it's literally that the left and the right didn't know each other. So there was this experiment, and in one channel, the experimenter would say, like in the headphones, would say, "Okay, I'd like you to wave," and so so the person starts to wave. And then in the other channel, the experimenter says, "Okay, and why are you waving?" And the person goes, "Oh, because I thought I saw somebody I knew." This channel, the researcher comes in and says, "I'd like you to laugh." The person starts to laugh, and then in the other channel, the experimenter says, "Why are you laughing?" And the person says, oh, because you're such a funny person. That's what the mind does. We'll look at this much more in the M channel week, but the mind is busy making sense of the shadows on the wall. Why is that real? Because it's reassurance. It's reassurance. Hey, those shadows, that's reality. I can tell you why. I can tell you why that makes sense. I can give you examples of that and tell you what's going to happen next. I'll give you a reason, because our system needs to know we're not going to be rejected. We're not going to be exiled from our tribe. It's the mind is there to say, hey, you know what you're doing? It all makes sense. It's all good. You're not going to get kicked out of the tribe. All well. And here's why. And it'll give you reasons. And that's a primary function of our mind, is that level of reassurance. However, it's just not true, and doesn't care much about that truth in that way. So we have to then have a different relationship to our experience, and the M channel is going to be sort of cut loose in the freezy business side of things, and is going to be telling you all kinds of things about why the rest of this is happening. The image channel is freer. We can use then the image channel to be able to achieve our goals of empowerment by more positive reinforcement, feeling better, right? So that there's more energy to work with. And then we can imagine, create images that then give us more positive feedback, and we can even imagine ourselves in the here and now, oriented in the here and now. And so in this week upcoming, we're going to practice some of that imagining, getting images of being in the here and now. Just a quick caveat, not everybody images, and it's not, you know, why that happens. We can nerd out about that later. But just know that you can also get a sense. If you're a person who doesn't image really well, or you can develop image ability, and we'll talk about that in the context of object constancy in the course. But we are going to be able to develop the image capacity so that we can shift our system from phase one more toward the ability to do phase two, which is all of these skills: orientation to pleasure, healthy, wholesome, non-intoxicant related pleasure, and then be able to do the things that help us feel better more consistently. So I want to bring in one of the questions that Jennifer brought in. What if you're just so chronically fatigued, but that you still have to function at some level? Can't be in bed all the time because you have to do work, family commitments, and so on, right? You have to live in reality, bare minimum somehow, so that where the push, coffee, et cetera, come in, how do you find a balance with this system? And that's Jennifer, thank you. That's a perfect question, because it's balance that we are seeking, and and it means that we're going to make small adjustments over time. We'll make these small adjustments in the SUPs. We'll make the small adjustments in all of our I-stoma channels. We're going to make these small adjustments by getting ourselves more energy in a way that doesn't then go too much. If you have chronic fatigue, part of the problem is when you begin to get energy, then one tends to overdo. And then there is the negative reinforcement of that, because instead of doing just the right amount, you do too much, and then there is the kickback of the collapse, and then the reinforcement of doing too much, and then freeze again, and then you're back into the cycle of having done too much, the addiction to intensity. So we're going to practice by not doing too much, by the orientation, connecting to the environment through the senses, and trying to ride the waves of energy when there are waves, and beginning to restore that battery of energy, and without it going too far and too fast. It'll take time. We as adults have had a lifetime of disorganizing information brought to us, and we are going to then spend 9 weeks together learning a really different way of cooperating and collaborating with our biological system. And so it'll be incremental, it'll be step by step, but Jennifer, you're in exactly the right place, because there's no other program that I know of that does it this way, that understands from this complex systems framework, and that really works from that from this three-phase model that I created for organic intelligence. That, in fact, is organic intelligence. So we're going to be working this way. We're going to be joining together on Facebook to really practice these step-by-step notions. I'm going to be here for you in the coaching. I've sent you an email that has the schedule of our coaching, so put those on your calendar, put these webinars on your calendar, because as you can see, I'll be responding directly to your questions. And along the way, we're going to be learning more and more about these graphics. And just to say that, in terms of self-development, here I often have a lack of self. So I'm trying to self myself through inner work, and I'm trying to self-reflect myself back into existence. But that's really no self at all. What we need then is all of my sense of agency to come online, and I get my reds and blues saying, oh, I like this. I'm a person who likes this and doesn't like that. And I'll be able to then develop a sense of ego from that, a sense of self from that. And that sense of self is agency. I can do this. I'm a person who likes this. I don't like that. And that ego strength develops in phase 2. And then as we begin to move toward phase 3, I begin to feel the pleasure of letting go of all of that. I don't need so much of that, and I can begin to let go of that. And then over time, I even let go of these sense of identifications with self and ego. But you have to have ego strength, ego self, in order to begin to let go of it. So there are stages in development. There's a developmental trajectory in relationship to self-development as well, and the necessity also of engaging with the world with that kind of ego position, right? That the world is expecting somebody to show up, and we can move from, say, an ego position into a quality of real being and presence that people are really starving for. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to help each other on, and why we can move out of the polarities into really a unified experience of being. All right, and the image channel. There is also in your bonus section an extended conversation that I present on image from the OI Expert course. So if you like more information on how imagery has evolved for our species and place that within a more anthropological and scientific standpoint, you can check in on that about imagery there. So feel free to be in touch anytime. We're at eotc@organicintelligence.org. I'll be over on our Facebook group also, be interested to see the conversations that happen, and feel free also to reach out to our moderators. Great expertise on the moderator team there. And in the meantime, I'll look forward to our next conversation in our coaching time. Thanks for being a part of this, this course, and enjoy, because that, that is the job in our image week as well. All right, talk soon.